So there were 4 bars that opened around the same time then in 1997. The Met Bar, Alphabet, Home in Shoreditch,
Yeah.
and Match Bar.
And, well, Alphabet, I think, was 96, and Momo was 97.
Right, Momo.
Yeah.
The one, was that in Regent Street?
Headon Street, yeah.
Headon Street, yeah.
Yeah, just where the new Ambassadors Clubhouse is.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic basement bar there. And where Quant was for a while.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
That's how you say it.
Yeah, it was no one's still quite sure, apart from Eric. So arguably this was the start of the cocktail revival in London. Would you frame it that way? Do you think that was the kind of moment?
Absolutely, definitely. It's a weird zeitgeist moment where several people were doing similar things at the same time without knowing what anyone else was doing. So when I opened Match in Clerkenwell in 97, I didn't know about the Met Bar then. But the Met Bar opening and getting all that publicity was a big help to us because we were doing similar drinks, cosmopolitans and things like that, and, you know, martini-style drinks that Kate Moss was drinking was on the front pages of all the magazines and stuff. So that really helped us in our sort of desolate warehouse district of Clerkenwell at the time. And Home was cool, and sofas, and we had a bit of that too. And I really loved Alphabet at the time. Alphabet was such a vibe and a scene in there, and Spike was brilliant on the floor. And it was like a real demi-monde that was going on then.
I never went there. No, but Spike I know very well, I can imagine.
Yeah. I think if we went there now, we'd think, what's the big deal about this? But it was just, I loved it at the time.
It reopened in Islington, I think, probably in name only.
Yeah,
but they did try and reboot it a few years ago. I think it's still going, but I don't think it's,
I think you're right. I've completely forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And I went to the Met Bar a few times and absolutely fucking loved it. I mean, you know, it was might have been a bit wanky. I don't think so. I just absolutely loved it. You know, I was working in the city at the time. I was a lawyer at the time, wearing a suit for work and things like that. There's another bar called Ricky Tick that opened in Soho that was really cool as well. And they had a no suits policy. And there was a lot of no. I remember we had a no list at Match Bar, like no dickheads, no pints, no energy drinks, you know, that kind of thing. No Jack Daniels. We were a big, you know, because everyone wanted Jack and Coke. Sorry, we don't have that. We can give you a Woodford and Coke if you want. It was all because there's so much about the sort of London drinking scene that just wasn't cool. It was too mainstream and generic, and a lot of people with new ideas, I think, for the time anyway, wanted to shake that up a bit, and we were just one of those.
What inspired Match then? Was it really inspired by what wasn't available rather than what you'd seen?
Absolutely. So I'd moved to London. My hometown is Manchester, and I love being from Manchester. I love that being part. That's probably the only thing I really identify as, that and a Man United fan. Those are the two things. I'm not really a category person or a tribal person. But I remember moving to London in March 1990 after nearly a year in France, between law college and starting work in the city. And, you know, putting on a suit for the first time properly, marching into work down Moorgate, thinking I'm the man. Got my first proper job, working in a big city law firm, starting in the corporate department. I always wanted to do corporate law and M&A, and it's around the time of, you know, things like Wall Street and Masters of the Universe, you know, those kind of things. Bonfire of the Vanities, all that stuff. So, you know, I was getting carried away with myself.
Michael Douglas. Right.
Yeah, all that stuff. And thinking, you know, this is going to be great. And I remember working in this in the corporate department for the first week, and at the end of the week, got on really well with a partner in charge of what I was doing. He said, listen, let's go for a drink after work. It was a Friday night. I thought, I'm in London, going to go in out bar. That's going to be fantastic. I remember walking across the street and down some stairs to this sort of flagged stone sawdust on the floor. It wasn't the Davies wine bar, but it was one of those kind of things. And it was all blokes in their 50s and 60s drinking red wine out of a glass, or like mead style thing, ale out of a tank.
Sounds like a Davies.
It's fucking awful. And, you know, I always say the wine tasted like it had 2p coins on the bottom of the glass. It was like shit wine, shit beer, shit vibe, shit everything. And then, but there was like carrots, raw carrots you could crunch on.
Oh, lovely. That makes up for it.
And then biscuits, right? And I just thought, this Friday night, what the fuck am I doing here? I could be in Manchester at the Hacienda and going to the Match tomorrow and just having, you know, and just really living it, I thought. So very quickly I realised that every 2 weeks I'd go back to Manchester and to go out for a couple of nights.
Manchester had a better nightlife than London in the 90s, you think?
Well, from 88 to 92, Manchester was probably the capital of the going out universe, I think. It was just absolutely fantastic. Ecstasy had arrived. The Hacienda was already there. The DJs were already there. The crowd, most importantly, was already there. People were that sort of music scene was moving to Manchester to try and make something happen, and it did. And I'd gone the wrong way, you know, I'd moved the wrong way, but I had got a really good job, and I, you know, way above my expectations in life, really, considering my background and my schooling, where I'd end up. A really good law firm, and they were great to me. And so I was hanging out in Manchester a lot in the early 90s. And then I always say that Manchester, people went from the club scene as they got older straight into a bar scene. So Dry Bar opened in Manchester, which is a really inspirational bar on me. Whereas in London, we went from club scene into restaurants. So again, I think you think around 87, the restaurant scene in London was pretty miserable, until I think Harvey's opened, the River Cafe opened, Bibendum opened, some really iconic, significant restaurants opened that transformed London's eating out scene, restaurant scene forever. That didn't happen in Manchester. It's only really happening in the last couple of years, like, you know, 30 years later, whatever. In fact, it's getting on for 40 years later, nearly. And went straight into a bar scene, a club scene. And so I went up there, and there's bars like Barca opening. I don't know, you're way too young to remember Barca.
Yeah.
A friend of mine had designed that, a guy called Paul Harrison, and it was just like, wow, this is amazing. It's just like being in Spain. It's like being on the Mediterranean. It's just like being in fabulous Barcelona.
Transportative.
Yeah, it was so cool and different and new. But they were still selling pints of shit beer and, you know, and shit gin and tonics and all that stuff. But that was really inspirational for me. And also, and this doesn't get enough credit, the gay village in Manchester, Canal Street, was absolutely fucking magical. To walk down that street and all that colourful nightlife.
Still fucking cool. It's you know, really good.
It's just, I absolutely loved it. And I remember, I remember going to Singapore once and coming back, and there's an outdoor street. Is it Circular Quay or something? I can't remember what it's called. And just seeing all these people out on the street drinking and having a good time, carousing, and just fun existence. And Canal Street was like that for, you know, large parts of the year when it wasn't raining or when it wasn't cold. And I just absolutely loved it. And I just thought, why doesn't this exist in London? It's our capital city, and there's just nowhere. You've got All Bar One, you've got Pitcher and Piano, you know, and you've got a load of shit pubs that you don't go in if you were, you know, a girl, for instance. And so that had happened to me, and I'd been to Dry Bar and just thought it was the coolest bar on the planet. You know, I was New Order had opened Dry Bar after the Hacienda, and you know, the whole sort of music scene was in there. And that was the first bar I'd been into in the UK where they didn't have all the spirits on optics, because every single place in the planet in the UK had, you know, spirits on optics. Dry Bar, they had them all lined up, you know, and you just thought, this is amazing. This is like, you know, supermarket of booze. And it was just incredible with the music, and they had a DJ, and it was all like designed around having a good time. And then when I was still a lawyer, obviously, at the time, but going back and forth a lot. And then I got the chance to go to Hong Kong with my law firm for a year. I've got to tell this story. It's a bit long and boring, but I'll tell it.
Don't worry. Let's just not fill up the next hour with it.
So there's two inspirational moments, Manchester and Hong Kong. So I remember flying to Hong Kong to work in Hong Kong for a few months, nearly a year, with my law firm. I remember landing at Kai Tak Airport, you know, when it was the old airport. And I was met at the airport by my firm's driver. I can't remember his name, he was a great guy. I was picked up in it was a Saab 900, which was a fancy car back then with leather seats in the back. And I was in the back, and there's a car phone in the middle. And I'm sat in these leather seats thinking, this is just amazing. I'm living the dream here. I've just landed in Hong Kong, and I'm being driven to my apartment by the firm's driver. And the phone rang in the car, and the guy answers it, and he says, "It's for you, Mr. Downey." I was like, fucking hell, car phone. This is 1991, right?
Wow.
And this is like a big deal. I felt like James Bond or something. So I answered the phone. It was the guy I was taking over from, a guy called Rob Hanker. And he said, "Hey, JD, we're going to Captain's Bar at the Mandarin Hotel this evening. About 6 o'clock. We'll see you there." So the driver dropped me at my apartment. It's like a 28th floor apartment with views of Hong Kong Harbour. I just thought it was amazing. First thing I did was call my mum to tell her what was going on, and she was so excited for me. And then I went down to the Captain's Bar and ordered a gin and tonic in the Captain's Bar, and it was absolutely, you know, like groundbreaking, magical moment. Tall cut glass, a glass stirrer, large chunks of clear ice in a tall glass with, you know, a good serve of vodka, of gin, topped up with, you know, tonic, and then a slice of lemon or lime, I can't remember. And I just drank this gin and tonic. I thought, oh my God, that's what it's supposed to taste like. Because the gin and tonic at the time in the UK. Everywhere you went, ice and lemon with that. Of course I want ice and lemon. It's a fucking
I mean, that
drink.
carried on in most places through to the 2000s, you know?
Yeah. So that was like that. I saw, so that kind of, in the back of my mind, you put that quality of drink, that style of drink making together with a Manchester atmosphere, bar scene, and bring that to London was like what Match was supposed to be about. So like, they were called cafe bars in Manchester, bit of food all day, decent drinks, and that's kind of what Match was in the end. But I didn't know how I was going to do it until I bumped into a guy called Dave Steward, but I should probably let you talk for a bit.
In case you haven't heard, this is going to be the summer of the Paloma. It's a fantastic long tequila drink, the bedfellow of the margarita, citrusy, fresh, and incredible vibrant pink color. If you're going to make this drink, then you're going to need this from my sponsor, Fever-Tree, their pink grapefruit soda. Made with fresh, ruby red grapefruits, it adds that wonderful sweet, sour, and slightly bitter tang to a nice Paloma. Take yourself a highball glass, fill it up with plenty of ice, add a splosh of your favorite tequila, and then top up with Fever-Tree's pink grapefruit soda. Finally, and most importantly, finish with a slice of pink grapefruit. Now, let's get back to the show.
During the 90s, because I was working in quite a mundane environment, law firm, but everyone was like, you know, straight tie, quite tightly wound, best behaviour, no swearing. I was the only person with an accent in the firm. Stood out a little bit. I just wanted to do something that was a bit different, a bit more interesting than that, and definitely wanted to do what I'd thought about with drinks. And I'd got into the kind of drinking, the cocktail culture of the time, reading books. Dick Bradsell was writing in Arena magazine. Every month there'd be a new page of Dick Bradsell writing about cocktails and bars and stuff like that. And I was fascinated by it. I couldn't wait to get Arena and read what he was writing. And also, I forget the name of the guy that was the first chef at the Eagle in Farringdon. He was writing about food, and gastropubs were happening, and obviously things were changing. And I just thought, Dick Bradsell is the man. He's the guy I've got to meet, and I'd love to do that with him. And I'd been talking to Paul Harrison, who designed Barca, about opening a bar in London. And I'd come back from 2 years in Abu Dhabi with my law firm. I'd gone out there to open our office in Abu Dhabi and had a brilliant time, 94 to 96. Met a couple of friends, Omar and Mark, who were hotel managers, general managers of big hotels, 5 stars in Abu Dhabi. And we'd been talking about doing our own thing. And we said, let's do a hotel. We'll do our own hotel. And we had some really great ideas for hotels that weren't happening at the time. And so we said, yeah, but we didn't know anything about business. You know, we'd never worked together. We didn't really know anything about each other. We were social friends with dreams. I came back to London, got talking to Paul Harrison, spent more time up in Manchester, and just thought, we've got to do a bar first. Let's do a bar first. It's much smaller investment. We don't need 5 million quid to do a bar. We need at least that to open a hotel, and we'll get to know each other and we'll get to understand a bit about business. So I found the site in Clerkenwell because I was living in Clerkenwell. I bought a flat, spoke to Paul Harrison about it, spoke to the boys about it. We all put in £25,000 each. And we borrowed £75,000 from the bank, and I was down there weekends and evenings with a shovel and a wheelbarrow digging out. We had to dig out the kitchen a couple of meters down so we could stack the loos on. Paul designed the whole place for me, did a brilliant job of it. And
it's not an easy build for your first bar.
It's not an easy build, but we had some advantages. We had bare brick walls, which we found. We had these amazing cast iron columns. You know, we had this really big shop frontage and it opened out onto Clerkenwell Road, outside seating, big windows, so you could see in that it was safe in there, wasn't there? But the missing ingredient was the drinks, and I knew I really wanted to do great cocktails. Didn't know a single. Been going to the Atlantic a bit because the Atlantic bar was absolutely incredible at the time, a really incredible scene there, if you could get in. And Dick Bradsell had left the Atlantic by then. I think he was at Detroit or somewhere. I can't remember where he'd gone to. Didn't know him. Didn't really know anyone who knew him. And I'd been up in Manchester for the opening of Machinair, Oliver Payton's restaurant up there, which is, again, 30 years ahead of its time, as a lot of things that Oliver did were. He was just way ahead of it. And I'd met this guy that up there who had this kind of really striking specs on and had a good vibe about him. He's called Dave Steward. And I didn't know that at the time. Just sort of saw him across the room. Anyway, 3 days later, I'm at is it not Momo? Morrow on Exmouth Market, sat at the bar at Morrow, which is this new style restaurant at the time. And sat next to me was Dave Steward, and I recognised him from his specs and said, I just saw you in Manchester. He goes, yeah, good to see you, nice to see you. I said, well, my name's JD, I'm a lawyer, but I'm doing, he said, all right, I'm thinking of opening a bar. I said, where do you want to do that? I said, just down the road on Clerkenwell Road. He said, okay, what kind of bar do you want to do? I said, well, I do blah, blah. I told him the whole blurb with cocktails. He said, if you want to do cocktails, you need to meet this guy. And he sat next to him was Dick Bradsell. I'm like, fuck, you are Dick Bradsell.
Else are you hiding back there?
And he's like, you're joking. And
wow.
And just such a bit of serendipity.
So that lunch, like maybe the most important lunch you ever had.
Absolutely. Who knows what would have happened?
Yeah.
I probably would have done one bar and given up and still be a boring lawyer. But I met Dick, completely hit it off with him straight away, told him what I wanted to do. And I think he was at a loose end at the time, or he was, thinking about leaving wherever he was. And he was our opening head bartender, brought the team in, did the cocktail list. I worked with him on that because I really wanted to be involved in what we did. We came up with that Magnificent 7 idea. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah.
We had 7, drinks that we thought gave a good impression of what we did, which included mojito. No one was drinking mojitos at the time. No one, not any of these other bars. They just didn't exist. Cosmopolitan was the drink of the moment. Vodka espresso, as it was then. Old Fashioned was on there. I can't remember what the others were, but there were 7 drinks that really stood the test of time. And they were on a big screen and always there, and that really helped to sell them, and people tried them and liked them.
It's a nice number as well, isn't it? Because if you had 12 or 15, it suggests some sort of dilution of attention towards these drinks. 7 suggests there's a good amount of variety here, but also we're making sure we nail every single one.
Yeah. And, we opened this, what I thought was a great bar with great music and great bar team. Probably the food wasn't that great at the time, in a really sort of challenging location.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that, because Clerkenwell's always, for me, seemed like sort of in between east and west.
Yeah.
Like a kind of corridor in a way.
Yes.
And not that much of a neighbourhood around there, I don't think.
It's weird, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not really changed that much.
Yeah.
And St. John Street was almost like a graveyard for restaurants for a while. St. John's obviously lasted the course of time. And Luca has been, I think, 8-9 years now, but very few survive the course there. And Smithfield's never really happened. I mean, that should be one of the most dynamic centres of London. I think it may end up being that in the next 10 years if they redevelop it. So I remember we opened this great bar, but, this is before social media. You can't put it on Instagram and suddenly 1,000 people turn up. So I honestly remember to this day still standing there on like a Thursday evening or whatever, and, at the front door, looking down the street and thinking, where the fuck is everybody? And nobody came. And then Edward Sullivan, who used to write the drinks pages and the bar reviews for the Evening Standard, came in one night. And thankfully I was in that night and hit it off with him, got talking to him. And he used to do this thing called Evening Standard Bar of the Year. And it was coming up to that in a couple of 3 months, I think. And I don't think there was much competition at the time. There's one other really good bar. I can't remember which one it was now. But we ended up winning that. And that just completely put us on the map. Because you think about the hundreds of thousands of people reading that paper.
Well, that's where they have to get their information from, right? So,
yeah, exactly. And that just completely transformed anything. So that was another good sort of turning point for us at the time.
I remember, I only opened my first bar in 2010, and social media was obviously around by that point, but nowhere near as big as it is now. And we got one amazing review in Time Out, and it completely changed everything.
Time Out was very powerful as well, massively powerful. And Time Out was really good as well, really good at finding out the best bits of London and sharing that. I still think they do a good job to some extent.
So, how long did Dick stick around for?
Well, he was a real itinerant, and I think he probably stuck around for maybe a year. But one of the things I like to say was that he came back and worked with me again, and I don't think he ever did that with anyone else. We always stayed good friends. I think he often left on bad terms, not deliberately. He just always seemed to sour a bit. And we set up a drinks consultancy events company together called Bar Solutions, right? Which
that's what it says on the tin.
Yeah, exactly. Because we were doing these great drinks, and we were getting requests all the time. Can you do our wrap party for a film, and can you do our this for a whatever it was, and all the time. I thought we should be doing some of this. It sounds like fun. We might be able to make some money out of it, and just good stuff to be involved with. And we ended up doing the biggest event we ever did was the wrap party for The Beach, the Leonardo DiCaprio film, which was a big thing at the time. I can't remember what year that was, probably sometime in the mid-2005, I don't know. And there's 4 floors in this massive empty warehouse on New Oxford Street, I think it was. Just amazing venue, and there probably 2,000 people invited. There's one small room upstairs where Leo would go to or whatever, and all his crew. And it's just a brilliant thing, and we did that. We did a lot of those events, and we did some bar consultancy for some other people. That was just for me to find a way of keeping Dick involved. I wasn't really involved in it. It was about him making some money from stuff that he was particularly good at that we could attach his name to. And so I probably worked with him for about 4 or 5 years, all told.
I can't remember the player. Did you? Was that already a bar, and then you took it over? And was Dick involved in that initially as well?
Yeah, it was. In fact, I remember when the player opened and thinking, "Oh, this is brilliant." I loved going down there, and the guy who owned it was not. There was something not right about the guy who owned it. I can't remember his name now. He ended up, when we took it over, one of the conditions on the license was that he was not allowed back in the bar, and I'd never seen that before.
Wow, that's really made you stake your claim there.
Yeah.
What an impact!
That's brilliant notoriety. I wish I could remember his name.
Yeah.
His name is probably still on the license because that's 20. I took over the player in 2001, so that's nearly 25 years ago. And I remember going down. I think that opened in '99. I remember Dick invited me down to like one of the opening nights. Met the guy who owned it. He said, yeah, you can get membership. And, that membership was 300 quid or whatever. And we've got a 5 a.m. license. The license there was 1 a.m. It's never been any different. But he's telling everyone we had a 5 a.m. license, which, where'd you get a 5 a.m. from? I said, yeah, it's historical. We've, lucky to have it. Anyway, bullshit. But I really love the vibe down there. And Dick's Drinks, obviously, that really weird sort of quirky carpet with the P on it and orange and blue. And I just loved it down there. And then I remember... I was in Ibiza one summer, 2001. I was there for a long time again, and getting a phone call from an agent saying the player's gone into receivership. Are you interested in buying it? I said, yeah, definitely. I remember just making the decision in a swimming pool with my business partner, Rick. We were literally in the pool together, saying, should we buy the player?
That's pretty Michael Douglas. I'm imagining a pina colada with an umbrella, but I suspect you were probably drinking more sort of sophisticated drinks than that.
Well, again, if I hadn't bought the player, we would probably, again, be having this interview on my island in the Caribbean, because it diverted me from my mission plan with Match. I had 3 Match bars at the time. The plan was to create the next generation of all bar one pitch and piano. Pitch and piano had sold 7 sites for 25 million, I think, and all bar one had sold 7 sites for 35 million. I thought, right, 7 Match bars, that's got to be worth 50 million or something. That was the plan. And so we got Match Bar and Sosho, opened 3, really successful, busy bars in 20 months. Don't know how I did that. Could never do it again. But we were doing it. And then the player came along, and that diverted me from rolling out Match bars. And so...
Yeah, and I mean, obviously... You've then got one bar that sits outside of the concept, which in itself could be slightly derailing on your sort of tunnel vision to do this again and again and again.
Yeah.
But also you're then managing 2 different sort of ideologies. I mean, how different were they in sort of what they were trying to achieve? Yeah. What was the consistency and what was the difference?
Oh, that's a good question, because one of my main reasons for opening Match and what we tried to do was to democratize quality drinking, right? Make the kind of fabulous drinks you'd get at the Captain's Bar or the Mandarin Oriental Hotel accessible on the high street. It was about bringing brilliant drinks to the high street, or just off the high street, as most of my sites were. And we were doing that. We were getting people into great drinks quickly and easily. And then the player wasn't that. It was a Soho, late night, down some stairs, lounge bar. There was no door policy. You could get in if you weren't drunk and didn't look like you were a dick. But it was just a little bit different. And once you start trying to be a little bit cooler than that, a little bit more, not secretive, but a little bit more furtive than that, it becomes a different thing altogether. And then, so we opened the player in October 2001, and I'd already been looking at taking over the Milk and Honey site. And April 2002, we opened Milk and Honey. And that was another step away from democratizing high street quality drinks and into, late night Soho membership.
Why didn't you just open the player as the Match bar?
Because it was too good. I love the name, the player, and
It's a great name.
It's a great name, isn't it? And he already had I just love the vibe down there. All we did was, I think we paid £150,000 for it, and we spent £50,000. We literally transformed it in a week. We just ripped up the carpet and got a brand new one, the same pattern. And it was a skanky mess down there. It was really disgusting. It needed a steam clean, the whole place. We did that in a week and reopened in October, and it was just brilliant straight away, putting a much better sound system, just upgraded a cantilever bar system, just upgraded the back of house and the things that mattered and really made a difference. And then, but 6 months later, nearly, I was onto Milk and Honey and all of that, and that was a massive amount of work as well.
Yeah, so Milk and Honey claimed the top spots in 50 Best Bars 2009, 2010. The first 2 years they did it.
Yeah, and
London.
And the 2 years before that was their drinks business best bar in the world, I think.
Was it?
Yeah.
And then Milk and Honey New York, I think, was second in that first year. So the Milk and Honeys were 1 and 2 in 2009.
Yeah.
And I think it was 4th in the second year, the New York one. So this brand was effectively dominating global cocktail culture, both sides of the Atlantic at the time.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Well, it's all down to Sasha, really. He was the ideas guy behind it, but I suppose I helped him bring it to a level of renown that he probably wasn't looking for, but definitely embraced eventually. I was writing for Esquire magazine at the time on bars and cocktails, and I'd heard about this guy called DeGroff in New York that I wanted to meet and go on one of his cocktail safaris. And so we had a photographer come with us, and we rented a limousine, and we were driving around Manhattan, trying drinks. And we went to 7 bars and had 2 drinks in these bars, 2 cocktails in these bars. And by the end of the 7 bars, there's about 10 of us on this cocktail safari. Dale and I were the only 2 guys left standing, right? And this is true. I could properly hold my drink in those days. And he said, listen, I got this other place I want to take you to, but you're not allowed to write about it. And he'd prefer it if you didn't tell anyone about it. I was like, that sounds weird, but I was up for anything. And he took me down to Milk and Honey on Eldridge Street. And it was 2:00 in the morning on a probably Tuesday or Wednesday night. And, you walk into this bar the size of a railway carriage through this curtain and, candle lit. And there's this strange bloke in a Savile Row silhouette suit standing behind the bar. And nobody else in the place, literally nobody else. And I just thought, this is fucking amazing, and just immediately fell in love with the vibe of it. Sat at the bar with Dale. There's only 2 seats at the bar, I think. Ordered a rye whiskey and just got talking to Sasha. I'd had a few to drink and did that stupid, embarrassing thing of saying, have you ever thought about opening one of these in London? Thinking he's just going to say, fuck off, you boring British dick. But he went, I love the idea of that. He said, I would love the idea of that. I've never been to London. I've always wanted to go.
You must have made a very good impression at 2:00 in the morning with the skin flip. Because that doesn't sound like, I only met Sasha once or twice, but it doesn't sound like that would be an easy conversation to have with him.
Well, I was expecting a complete knockback and got the opposite, and good on him. Because I just think he had this idea of London. He had this idea of Europe. He had this idea of an era of, the sort of the between the wars era.
Yeah.
That he felt was his era that he belonged to. And he was a massive fan. And so what appealed to him was the idea of me paying for him to come to London, I think. So got him over to London for a few weeks. Showed it. I already had the site for Milk and Honey, but didn't know what to do with it. It used to be a fantasy bar. It was like a lap dancing bar. And
big site, right?
Yeah.
Lots of floors.
Lots of floors. Difficult to manage because of that, and would never do that again. But it was owned by the father of a friend of mine who had a fantasy bar in Manchester, which is a much better site and still empty, I think, owned by Green King, and could be a brilliant bar. And he just didn't know what to do with it. And I said, well, I don't know what to do either, but it's got a 3M license in Soho, and we're killing it with the player. So I'll figure out what I want to do with it. Let's sign the lease and figure it out. And then, met Sasha, showed him the site, told him what I thought we could do with it, and he absolutely loved it. Wasn't going to cost him any money.
How did that work then as a joint venture?
He was never a shareholder in London. I was never a shareholder in New York. New York never made any money anyway, so that didn't matter. But I used to pay him whatever he needed from time to time. And I think that first year, I mean, without going into too many details, he did really well out of it. He did really well out of it. I think if I've got one whinge about Sasha, and it is only one, is I think he's often underplayed the amount of money Milk and Honey London paid him. It paid him a lot of money, probably £1 million over the period, close to. But he never had any cash. He never had any money. He was always doing, I don't know, he was never buying himself things. He used to ride around Manhattan on that crappy old bike. He had 3 or 4 suits that he wore in never traveled business. He was a humble guy, but he never seemed to have any money. I don't know if he was being ripped off or he had a gambling habit or whatever. But I remember having to lend him £20,000 to get married, And this is the first time I've ever mentioned that to anybody, but I think it's been long enough now. I mean, I did a lot for him. But I used to hear back, I think he used to badmouth the London experience to his New York mates. And that wasn't the experience I had with him. I absolutely loved the guy. I thought he was awesome. And I still celebrate his, I don't commemorate his death every year with a daiquiri somewhere. But he was really reticent at first to do any publicity for the bar. I said, "Come on, mate, I've spent hundreds of thousands of pounds fitting this place out." He had a little bit of input on the design, but not a great deal. We obviously did his tin ceiling. I designed it. A friend of mine, Mango, where we put everything where we wanted it. He gave us, we obviously had the ice wall on the bar and all the things that he wanted.
Was he anti-publicity because he personally wasn't interested in doing that, or because he felt it was against the concept itself?
Because of the New York experience of opening bars at the time. He didn't want that frat boy idiot crowd rocking up, ruining the place. And, that's really what some of those rules were about. I don't think he understood that wouldn't have happened in London. We don't, we've got that sort of city crowd. But even so, nowadays, you don't really see that. You don't have to be worried about bad behaviour in bars in London the way you used to 20 years ago. It's just not an issue anymore. In fact, I've been thinking about that with the new place I've opened. You don't have to stop people coming in by pricing them out or by not selling pints or by not selling energy drinks. And he was just really worried that it would be invaded by the wrong kind of people. And he obviously didn't trust my intentions. My intentions were always to help him realize his dream of opening what he wanted in London. And because I thought one of the things I have been good at in the last 20 years or so is finding talented individuals and then backing them with their approach. Okay. And helping nurture and guide and, them in the right direction. And let's make it commercially successful as well, so we can keep going, so you can keep living your dream, but not trying to stop them achieving what they want. I spent a good half of last year working with Merlin Labron Johnson at his new restaurant in Somerset, his dream project, and he's got his ideas. He's a young guy. It's his first restaurant where there's a lot at stake. He's got investors. I helped him with that a bit. And, I just wanted him to realize his dream because he's the talent. I've got my talents, but he's an exceptional chef. He's got a team of acolytes and followers there that believe in him and want to follow him. He's got a vision, and it's really about realizing that. And I wanted to bring a commercially sustainable version of Milk and Honey to London that was better than the original I think in so many ways. We had to make some compromises. So putting the East Eight Hold Up vodka cocktail on the list was one of them. We didn't compromise on music. We didn't compromise on ice. We didn't compromise on anything else, really. It really was exactly how we would have wanted it. And he used to love coming there. He used to live upstairs on the top floor. He insisted on living on site. I said, get you a flat or whatever. I think he was there for 6 months when we opened. Probably went back to New York for a week in the middle of it, and then would spend 3 months a year with us. And every time he came, he was an inspiration. There'd be 1 or 2 new bartenders, very few people, there'd be low staff turnover at Milk and Honey. But he'd come and he'd add some more music to the playlist, which was brilliant. I love that playlist he came up with. And he'd be inspirational to bartenders, and he'd have a great time here. He would come here and have a great time.
And then Dale was performing a similar role as well. You brought him on as director of drinks, or was that the title?
Exactly that, yeah. He was, he was another just genius, joy to work with. Absolutely loved Dale. His enthusiasm, his knowledge, his belief in bartending. you know, he was just brilliant. We used to have this first Tuesday training session, the first Tuesday of the month that every bartender had to attend, and it was like 3 hours at the Player usually. Bartenders like Michael Butt would, you know, set the questions of Giles Looker and Kevin Armstrong and all those guys. And it was a really intense, competitive session. We'd usually have a drinks expert in there, someone teaching on cognac or vodka or gin or whatever it was. And then there'd be some drinks competitions maybe, or there's always be a written test. And it was always very competitive, and making bartending, what's the word? I don't know, more academic.
Yes.
As well as. But Dale, what Dale would add, he always just say to me, when hiring bartenders, I look for three things: personality, and personality. Everything else we can teach you.
Yes,
right?
it's true. Yeah.
And he was just brilliant at that. He was just the raconteur, that, you know, just a really great guy to spend some time at the bar with, you know, with stories and empathy. You know, a good listener, good talker, and could just be knocking up a brilliant drink for you while all this is happening, and then flame that, you know, Cosmopolitan, there you go, mate. I'm sorry she's left you, and this is going to help.
But look at this.
So I used to love Dale coming over, and so did the bar team.
So, yeah, I mean, like you say, personality. If you've got the right personality, then you're inherently going to be trainable in any way, because you'll have that kind of motivation to grow and all this kind of thing. It really is all that matters, and everything else comes downstream of it, I suppose. But yeah, your training programs, they're one of the things that really, I think, probably gave you a huge edge at the time, both in terms of the skill set of your bartenders, but also attracting new talent who people wanted to come in, because it felt almost like a diploma, or an apprenticeship, like, nice. as it is, where you sort of spend one day learning and 3 or 4 days on the job kind of thing. And also I think it really established that academic approach to bartending that still perhaps isn't really practiced in the same way really anywhere anymore.
No.
But nevertheless, it still acknowledged that, you know, it probably in many ways actually informed the whole brand ambassador program as well, because you're bringing brands in to talk, and then brands start to recognize that actually if we become the sort of source of the knowledge of all these things, and as a trainer and as an educator, then that gets us on side with the bars and the buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, that really came from me, and I don't know where I got it from, but I must have got it from somewhere. But I really wanted the no bullshit approach, like just, you know, we did a lot of blind and double blind tastings, you know, like, let's just see which is the best tasting product. Is it Havana 3 or is it Bacardi? You know, that's for example, because Havana 3 was the hot brand and Bacardi was like the toxic brand.
Ubiquitous,
you know, and ubiquitous, you know, and you're like, well, which is the one, you know? And I remember doing a blind tasting, a double blind tasting. I knew that Bacardi was in there, of a mojito with the Bacardi, and I actually chose Bacardi as my favorite. I said, well, okay, we can sell it now then. And I don't care about that.
And that actually baggage that comes with it, we know it's better. And
and I'd also been to Cuba in the meantime and not been allowed at the Havana 3 distillery, and you start to think about what
might have been a factor.
What are they putting? No, what are they putting in it though? You know, what are they? You know, so it's like you're trying to hide something for us, and so I'm just going to go solely on taste alone.
Yes,
and you know, insisted on doing it twice to make sure it wasn't just a lucky one, and picking out the same thing each time. And I could see the brand ambassador going, yes, right. Because it's kind of like made for a mojito. You know? There's nothing wrong with that. But
how aware do you think your customers were that there was this sort of fairly intense, fully sort of explorative bar training and tasting program that went on behind the scenes? Did you advertise that this was happening, or was it really just the downstream effects of that knowledge, you know, build trust in the customer because these guys seriously know what they're talking about?
Exactly that. I didn't even cross my mind to sort of, in the way that you go to a restaurant now, you know, some chefs are careful about their sourcing and their provenance and stuff like that. And some restaurants will put on the back 50-mile menu, we sourced this from this farmer, this from this farmer. We didn't feel the need to do that. It was just about giving the bartenders the confidence, the knowledge, the experience and the exposure to really know what they were talking about, and to just take pride in their work, take pride in their products, and to just produce the best they could, you know, and it really worked. And it wasn't like a strategy. I just thought, I want you guys to know what you're talking about, because, and I wasn't trying to be the best. I just thought this is how we should be doing things, you know, and it worked. It really worked because people bought into it, you know, and like you say, people would come on board because they heard about this kind of diploma program.
How important is music in bars?
Oh, massively important and hugely neglected, and big grump of mine, definitely. Especially when you see ceiling speakers and things like that. It's just like I just think you guys you piss me off.
Is that the Mancunian in you? Do you think?
I think so. I think that formula I always say, which is I roll out, which is great drinks plus great time equals a great bar. Right? You can't have a great bar without it being fun as well. I don't think it's the definition of a bar for me. And so you often don't get that in hotel bars. And I think the kind of bars that I like are the bars where you can have a great time and a great drink, and music's a massively important part of that. In fact, the new place we're opening, having real issues with the music and the sound. They've got a really good, expensive sound system in there that's just not working at the moment, and it's been driving me mad for 2 weeks. And I was in there on Saturday night being wound up, walking around the place thinking, why does it sound like this there and that over there? And we've got some issues to deal with there, and probably another £20,000 to spend on sound and and sort the playlist out.
That's a lot. But then again, like I say, if it's so key to the success of the bar, then it's probably money well spent, right?
I like people to just leave feeling like they've had a brilliant time without necessarily knowing why that is. And that's a symptom, a consequence of lighting, air quality, sound. It's the temperature of a drink is the comfort of the seat is a consequence of so many things. And I don't know if it's an OCD or an ADHD thing or whatever element it is, but I'm hypersensitive to all of those things, especially lighting, especially the smell of a place, all of these things. They're just absolutely so important, and they're imperceptible to most people, but you end up leaving thinking, really fucking nice time there. And when I get that from leaving a bar or a restaurant these days, I just think they've got a lot that's right in there.
Yeah, I think often the main factor on a night out that is quite obviously perceptible for most people is the standard of service. Mm-hmm. Most people are pretty aware when they're getting bad service or good service. But I think nearly everything else, and for a lot of venues, even the quality of the drinks, for a lot of people, is not. It's just more subtle. Yeah. Unless it's objectively bad, like this tastes disgusting. Yeah. People can have a sort of like 20% less good drink and probably not necessarily be aware that they don't think it's that great, but they will walk away with that in the back of their mind. Yeah. Same with music, same with lighting, same with the comfort of the seat. Yeah. And the toilets is another one, I guess. Like, it can be not great and people probably don't necessarily recognize it consciously, but nevertheless, it might grate on them slightly in the back of their mind. Again, really bad toilets, you're going to notice it, obviously. Yeah. So it's all these subtle things where if you can just marginal gain them up slightly, that people walk away and they're like, I want to go back to that place, and I'm not even entirely sure why. Yeah.
I mean, but it's like, I'm like that at home. All the lights in my flat dim, and I get in at night after whatever, and I want to set the room up so it's comfortable for me and my the way I feel. I want to wind down or chill out or whatever the reason is, and I'm just all over that all the time. I can't help myself. I think there is an OCD element to that.
I'm the same. I mean, I think it comes from bar operations, but I've spent a fortune on Philips Hue light bulbs, so everything changes with the time of the day, and and I'm constantly tweaking it. I'm like, the light's not quite right, and here the right color or the right. Yeah, I'm not doing like red lights at specific times of the day, but the warmth of the white light and everything, and the intensity. Yeah.
But as lighting systems become more complex and more controllable, they actually becomes harder to get the right vibe. Milk and Honey was much easier. Most of it.
Just turn them down as low as you can get away with.
Yeah. In fact, I was in the new restaurant on Saturday, and Hannah Sharman Cox was in there, and she still says she gets PTSD when she sees me because she thinks of the lights too bright.
But that's one of my rules. I think pretty much every bar can improve themselves by a significant margin by turning the lights down and the music up a little bit. Yeah. It's constant. Yeah. That usually most bars and restaurants for that matter, the lighting's a little bit too bright and the music's a little bit too quiet. For me. Yeah. And probably for most people.
It used to drive me mad because my subjective view of what was too bright or not loud enough was, I just assumed like everyone could see that. It's like, objectively, it's too bright in here. Yeah. Can't you see this? It used to exasperate me. Yeah. And and I'd say, watch. Just look at the room, watch. Better or worse? And they go, oh, yeah, it's definitely better. I said, yeah, obviously it is. Like, come on, guys.
But I mean, I think as a bar operator, you have to you have to assume that your subjective experience is actually objective reality.
Yeah.
You can't try and work to someone else's perceived subjectivity. You only have your own to go on.
Yeah.
Unless, like, you know, every other review is saying this thing is wrong, and then maybe you need to start shifting your opinion slightly. You have to go with your gut and say that this is what I think is great, and this is what I assume everyone else will think is great.
Also, I think I was a bit more fascist than that. So I think subject and objectively, 20 degrees is probably about the right temperature for a room. There is a line there, and I think I'm similar about the lighting and the you know, the sound and things like that. So I just expect everyone to know what the 20-degree mark is for all of that. But you know, they didn't, obviously.
So you've had some disasters along the way.
Have I gone? You've got to remind me of them. But yeah, probably.
Well, one of them just round the corner.
Oh, the fire.
Yeah, the fire.
Fuck me, that fire. Yeah.
So talk me through that. What state was the business in at that point? You know, how were things going, and how did that impact things?
So, yeah, God, you had to take me back there. I've had hypnotherapy to get past this.
Oh no, sorry. This is like anti-hypnotherapy. We're going to start drawing back up.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't have to pay for the hypnotherapy and have to go back through again.
Yeah, so that was March 2010. Easily the best thing I'd done at the time was the East Room. I don't know if you ever got to go there.
Yeah, I did.
But I really loved that venue. We'd stolen the tin ceilings from Milk and Honey. We'd got a really good space. We had Mike Sager as our sort of head bartender there, his first job in London maybe, and just create this beautiful mid-century modern space inside this old Victorian warehouse. And I just, you know, I remember sourcing all of the chairs and the furniture and the lighting, and then my first proper dining room as well, with a brilliant chef called Mark Broadbent, who'd been at Bluebird and Connaught Group. And if you look at that his menu now, because this is 2008 we opened it, it was just way ahead of its time. I mean, we had avocado on toast back then, you know, things like that.
You started the hipster revolution then.
Well, Mark did. And I've still got that menu, and it was just like, wow. I look at it now, I think you did a fucking awesome job. I mean, I was paying you a lot of money, but you earned it. And I was living in de Beauvoir at the time, in Dalston, and just got a call one morning to say that Sosho and the East Room was on fire, because the East Room was above Sosho. And we'd only had it 18 months, and it was a real success. And I just thought, all right.
An expensive build? Was it the most expensive project you'd done?
I spent nearly £2 million on it at the time, yeah, which is a fuckload of money, because at the same time I'd opened Match Bar and Grill in Melbourne, which had also cost around not quite £2 million. And I'd spending money I didn't have. I mean, I got some money from the bank in Australia and from the landlord. But you've got to think the financial crash had just happened as well. So it was a really fucking tricky time. And then Sosho, which was still doing really well, and the East Room burnt down. The East Room was killing it. And I just thought it was a small fire. But obviously it was early in the morning, came down, was told by the fire brigade that it was the biggest fire in London in 40 years. The entire building went up, the neighbouring building went on fire. And
that's not an accolade that you want.
No, and you know the story. It started with a tea light.
Yeah,
it's just astonishing, really. And the funny story about that is, it was a Wednesday night that the fire happened, and we'd had a party booking, like a big party in there that had gone on till 1. License was 24 hours there, but they only wanted it till 1. And the first thing they do when they arrive on the scene at a fire is they go to where the CCTV is. They take and seal the CCTV for insurance purposes and criminal purposes. And then about a month later, there's a meeting convened at a barrister's office in Gray's Inn or somewhere, I can't remember. I rocked up as a representative of the business owner. Lawyers there, police there, fire there. And they put this cassette into, VHS cassette into a video to watch, into TV to watch it. And we're all sat there watching. We had this awesome CCTV system at the time, 4x4, 16 cameras in the room, including some infrared stuff. And they put this on, and I'm sat there thinking, fucking hell, it's like from midnight. Let's get to midnight and see what happens. That's 12:30. I'm thinking, fucking hell, this is going to be a video showing our bar team, like...
setting fire to booze.
Setting fire to the bar, swinging their underpants around their head, just naked, having a brilliant fucking time at the end of the shift. Anyway, God bless them, they didn't do any of that. The last guest left about 1 o'clock. One of the key things in the insurance policy was, if you don't take your wheelie bins outside the venue, then your insurance is void, right? I'm thinking, if this isn't going to show that, we're fucked. I don't even remember there being a policy to do that, right? There obviously was. Whichever general manager bought that in, thank you, sir. Watch this happen. They did the best close down, clean down, fast. They didn't even have a beer after work. They just wanted to get out of there. The bins, you can see them wheel the bins out. I'm thinking, yes. And then it all goes dark. They had all 16 screens, the camera shots go dark. And then nothing happens. And then you just see this little flicker on like camera number 11 or whatever it was. You just see this little flicker, and it's this fucking tea light. We had 3 horseshoe booths on a raised area in Sosho against a brick wall, bare brick wall, and leather booths, solid wood around, bare brick wall, and there's an artwork above it. It was one of those, I think it was a Shepherd Fairy artwork or somebody like that at the time. Can't remember what. And you just see this light never goes out. And it was in a tall vase that had a candle in it originally. You can just imagine there's some wax on the candle. And probably someone had put some chewing gum paper in there or a cigarette wrapper or something and gone outside. It just never goes out, and it just gets more and more. And we just watch it over 45 minutes. Flames, smoke, and then it just cuts out because it's cut through the wires. And then, so 3 minutes after that, 4 minutes after that, the fire brigade arrive on site because you can see it's all time registered. They walked in, they saw it was a bar restaurant. They thought, oh, there might be gas canisters on site, and the policy is to get off site. I mean, some firefighters have just died recently, so I understand the policy, but they just turned around and left. They could have put it out in a minute, because it was in this vase and it had probably fallen onto, I don't know how it caught fire in the environment it was. It's beyond me or anyone else that was there, because you can see beforehand there was nothing there other than the booth, but it just took over, and it took us 7.5 years to get our insurance back.
Wow.
We had a huge claim, obviously.
Yeah.
And policy of insurance companies is, if these guys haven't got any money now because they've got no business, how can they fight this? We'll just play the long game. They'll go into liquidation. There'll be nothing left. But, thankfully, my legal background, that's never going to happen, right? We assigned the claim to a new company, protected it, ring-fenced it. We ended up putting that business into liquidation because it obviously had gone. Found a lawyer that would work on a no-win, no-fee basis, partly no-win, no-fee basis, you could do at the time. Brilliant firm, Edwin Co. And they did the claim, and they stuck with it for 7 years, and we ended up getting millions of pounds paid out, But that's not the story of everybody else. That's, 90% of people just give up.
Yeah.
So, we did nothing wrong there. That is what insurance is for, it's a pure accident, but it took a long time to recover from that.
Did it sort of taint like bar operations for you in general? Do you think it kind of, the experience of that, and then Match Bar and Grill in Melbourne, that didn't work out either, right around the same time, is that correct?
Yeah, that Match Bar and Grill in Melbourne was probably my most successful opening ever, apart from possibly Dinerama. We had a brilliant space, a great landlord, really loved Melbourne. Loved the Melbourne bar scene and the Melbourne crowd. That was a big factor for me. I'd been to Sydney and felt Sydney's a bit like West London. Melbourne's a bit like East London and more East London. Really wanted to do something, probably create a really beautiful space with them. It was a great restaurant, first proper chef I'd probably worked with, a really good chef, Aussie chef. Put a big Function One sound system in there. We've got a late license. And won Australian Bar of the Year in 2008 or 2009. It was a properly good venue. But my business partner there was a English guy. I can't even remember his fucking name now. Hypnotherapy's working.
Let's not do it anymore. Don't think too long on it.
He'd sort of collared me at a speaking event in Sydney, the Sydney Bar Show. I'd spoken at like 2 years previously. And he said, if you ever think of owning a bar in Australia, mate, I'll find the site, I'll do the deal, blah, blah, blah. And he did all that. And he found the site, and he got a deal with the landlord. I said, fuck, now I've got to do this. And so did it with him. I put all the money in, apart from the landlord, and he was 10% and I was 90%. He'd run pubs before, a lot of them for a big group. Anyway, long story short, he's got a massive cocaine and hooker habit, total fucking crook. Filing false accounts with the Aussie equivalent of Companies House, lying to the bank. I mean, just an absolute fucking twat of a guy. We found all this out far too late because we were just reading false accounts. The business was extremely profitable and he was just taking it all and spending it on coke and prostitutes. I had a really good GM in there. And then I said, right, we've got to try and get this guy out, because I was co-director with him. He was 90%. Australian company law is so archaic, right? It's like 1950s English company law. We couldn't get him out as a director. And so we couldn't put it into administration. There's things you just can't do to deal with the problem at hand that I would have been able to deal with in the UK.
Right.
Anyway, long story short, I had the bank on side, I had the landlord on side, everyone on side, and was about to put it into administration and then bring it back to life with this. The GM we had at the time was a great guy, and the GM we had at the time said, you're going to be director with me, and he just completely bottled it. And in the end, I just thought, you know what, fuck this, I'm done with it. And that was probably the most expensive decision I made. That cost me, at least personally, about $1.5 million. And it was so far away, and I put all my faith in this GM that was going to take over. He's doing a brilliant job of running it after we'd got the guy out of the site. We didn't let him in the building, even though he's still a director. But the new GM, and again, I can't remember his name, he just wouldn't take on the responsibility of being a director. He just didn't like the idea. So
You had one in Ibiza as well?
oh yeah, that was different. Ibiza was that's a different story. Fucking hell.
We've only got 15 minutes left. So.
Right. Just quickly then. So I wanted to do something a bit. So I was reigniting the Match Bar brand, right? I got 3 bars in 20 months to 2001 or whatever it was, 2000. And then I hadn't done a bar with Match Bar in it until 2008. So I thought, right, I'm on the Match Bar rampage again. So owned a bar in Ibiza. No, Javier Anadon, who owns Cafe Mambo and all of those, there's loads of places. Brilliant bloke, Javier. I love him to bits. But his bar wasn't working for him in Ibiza town because he was a San Antonio guy. So we bought this bar off him. That was a nightmare deal. He wanted me to give him all the money. And then I said, that's not the way it works, mate. I give the money to the lawyer. You sign the documents to the lawyer, and then the lawyer gives me the deed, and that's how it works. No, you give me the money. I'm like, no, mate. Anyway, Scottish wife Caroline saved the day in the end. He's got 2 good lads as well who are involved. So I got this bar, Match Bar. I thought, this is brilliant. Got a bar in Ibiza. We're going to make it the best one. I used to go to Ibiza all the time. Loved it down there. There's rock bar and what was it? Bass bar. And these were just notorious for where you get your drugs from. I never got any drugs from there because they're always shit, drugs. But notorious for that. And we were like 4 doors up from them. We were going to do proper drinks as well as They do the drugs, we do the drinks.
Love that.
And I remember making this brilliant bar one summer and opening it and going down there like proud, like please, I've got this bar in Ibiza and we're doing a really good thing. It's going to be the place.
It feels like a lifetime's ambition, sort of realised having a bar in Ibiza.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like buying your favourite local pub, I suspect, and then it's all of a sudden ruined for you.
Yeah. And we used to use it. I think we had the clubhouse at the time as well in Chamonix. And so if you're an Aussie bartender, for instance, visiting the UK, 2 years in Hospo in London, we'd give you a year at a great bar in London, maybe Milk and Honey or the Players somewhere, and then you could have 6 months in Chamonix, do a ski season, and you could have 6 months in Ibiza and do if this is a reward, like I got to go to Hong Kong as a lawyer as a reward and do Abu Dhabi for 2 years as a reward. You're really good at what you're doing. You go and do this for 2 years. Thank you. So we had this really great system of that. And one of our best bartenders, I won't say her name, but she was this, great bartender, really great person, great personality. Not your typical female bartender, not your typical bartender at the time. Really nice family, middle-class background, and kind of stumbled into bartending and just, felt born to it. And I remember thinking, we're going to send her out to Ibiza because she's great and she deserves it. And I remember walking down the dock there towards Match Bar with a mate of mine and seeing her standing outside Match Bar, and she was already selling drugs, and we'd only been open about 6 weeks. I just thought, fuck, selling the drugs wasn't necessarily really a problem because that was almost like the done thing down there, but not you.
Yeah.
I don't want to see you. Your mum and dad will not like this.
No.
I have kids, I had older kids probably about 10, that my oldest was about 10. And I don't want to be responsible for you doing this.
Yeah.
And I decided then, after 6 weeks of opening it, that, I was going to get rid of it. Like, this isn't right. And it also turned out that it's really hard to make money in a seasonal business.
Tell me about it.
It just became like, it just became an opportunity for people to sort of go wild and do the wrong things out there, where I was pissing into the wind trying to do good things there.
seasonal businesses, like it feels like you're opening the bar every single year. You know, as the season comes back, you've got to re-recruit, you've got to keep salaries on over the off season, and of course that means you're just losing money. So then you've got to really kill it in those important months, but getting training plans in place with all these new teams coming in so that you're maximizing opportunity. Yeah, it's hard work.
Really.
And of course, everyone just looks at it at the busy bit and goes, "Oh my God, you're absolutely killing it."
Yeah. But no,
not really. So yeah, do you feel like, so what your Street Feast started in 2012?
2012, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a shift towards food, to street food. I mean, you were doing drinks there as well, of course.
Yeah.
But do you feel like you started to fall out of love with cocktail bars?
Maybe a little bit. I think I started to fall out of love with the sort of like, do you know, like music stopped becoming about the dance floor and the crowd and became about the DJ. I felt that was the way bars were going. Stopped becoming about the guest and the experience, became about the bartender. And that was not why that wasn't my vibe really.
Do you think, do you think that match training kind of policy and, you know, empowering bartenders with all this knowledge, do you think that in any way possibly impacted that sort of bartenders self-aggrandizing themselves because I know all of this stuff now?
Yeah, I've done it, but that's also a personality trait, isn't it? If you just get drawn into thinking I'm brilliant and I'm going to tell you I am over and over again and show you different ways that I am, and you know, it happens to chefs as well. And
But then does it? I mean, if you've got the person that's not necessarily with match, but if you have the personalities in the hospitality industry who, you know, really start to believe that their shit doesn't smell, and then the rest of the bar community sort of observes that there's these bartenders who are getting placed on a pedestal because they have all of this knowledge and skill set, and they're the ones that are winning awards or getting, you know, to write articles, or the fame and all that kind of thing. And then the rest of the industry has to kind of rise up to that same kind of level in order to get noticed, you know?
Yeah. I think all of that's great, but so long as you don't then neglect the guest experience. And I think that's what I saw happening. Going to lots of bars that I just didn't think were fun to be in or even interesting to be in, you know. I mean, you know, you can go to a boring bar and still find it fascinating if the experience is just different. I just think bars tended to lose their soul and energy, I thought, and Street Feast was the opposite of that. I mean, it was just a complete vibe the whole time, and you know, for me, Street Feast wasn't about getting into food; it was just about getting into incredibly fun venues. It was like bringing a weekend festival into the centre of London and doing it every weekend, and just having a brilliant time with music. You know, we opened loads of Dalston Yard. I think we had 12 bars there. You know, that's a lot. And they all, and you know, we had a gin store, and we had a wine bar called Street Van, VIN. You know, it was an opportunity to do more with drinks than I'd ever done before. And I think, you know, we probably opened, with Street Feast, we probably opened like 150 different bars, you know, and probably 100 different brands. We had the German Sex Dungeon can bar at Dinerama, which is by miles the best bar I've ever opened. It cost about £3,500 to build it, and it made that in its first night back, you know, and all it was doing was cans and shots, just cans of craft beer in fridges, one or two bartenders, and shots of good whiskey, good tequila. It was just, I absolutely love that bar.
Really, isn't it?
And you go to the bar, I'll have that one, bam, you've got a drink straight away. You're not waiting for anything.
Yeah. And
you're in the outdoors of Dinerama and the whole crowd vibe and the music thing. But I love that bar. You know, that was just a simple expression of great beer, craft beers in cans, and really good whiskey and tequila that we liked.
So Street Feast was like firing on all cylinders. I remember you were opening various different venues, redoing car parks, this sort of thing. And like you say, tons of it going on. When was it at its peak? When was it? Just before COVID, probably.
Yeah, well, actually, the strange thing about Street Feast is that's probably at its peak for about 5 or 6 years before COVID. Yeah, exactly that. And it really fed into my boredom problem, because you could open new things every 6 months. You know, we'd open Dalston Yard, and then 6 months later we opened Hawker House indoors for the autumn winter. Everything was done on tens for a while, or it was a 2-year lease, so we've got 2 years to make this happen. Let's really make it happen. It's just like making the most of what you've got in the time you've got. And I think we found a really good gang of people to work with on that one. Great bartenders and great managers who just love the atmosphere. People who are really into their music and festivals, and just wanted to create this whole vibe of street food and drinks. And I also then got into food in a way that I became, in terms of talent spotting, finding, great future chefs and business owners like Lisa at Yum Bun, like Nud at Bredos, David at Smokestack, who's now got Manteca and Oma. All of these people that's, people like Bao coming to us that have gone on to do great little things in their own right. Almost all these guys had their first experience of selling food on the street with us. There's some other ones as well. Thunderbird Chicken was a great one, and just really good burgers that we had. And, again, no one else was doing it at the time. It was like a thing that, it wasn't so much a zeitgeist thing with Street Feast. I didn't set up Street Feast. Dom Coors Latique did that. But I went to Street Feast, which is a few hundred yards from where I lived in Dalston, and thought, you've got something brilliant here, mate. But it's nowhere near as good as it could be, and your drinks are crap, and your service is slow, and your sound system's not good enough, and there's nowhere to sit, and it's cold. What happens if it rains? And I just think about all these things, and and so he had the vision for it, and I just helped him take it on a little bit, which is kind of what we did with Sasha and Milk and Honey in London, but to a greater extent with Street Feast. And we professionalized it and made it commercially viable and successful without spoiling any of it at all, without compromising it in any way, bringing just nicer wine and better gin and, cold, good ice, just things like that to the drinks. And making sure no one was stealing all the door money and that kind of thing, just basic stuff. And that really got me into the food side of things, and just really appreciating trying my first Bredos taco at Nettle Market, short rib taco, and just biting into that and thinking, oh my fucking God, I've been to Mexico, I've been to Los Angeles, I've eaten, I've never eaten anything like it.
A good taco can change your worldview, I think.
It completely did. And I was became like a massive champion of what they're doing, and thinking, right, biting into my first Yum Bun, that, was just like, oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah. And I mean, I've not had that experience with drinks for a long time, but just quickly, recently, Kevin Armstrong and Dan Waddy have been helping me with the new drinks list at Town, the new place we've opened on Drury Lane. And they said, we're going to do a cocktail tasting at Satan's Whiskers. Can you come round at 12 o'clock? I think, I'm fucking too old to be doing cocktail tasting in the middle of the day. And, I've really not been drinking much lately, and I've kind of been on a bit proper health trip for about 7 months. And I said, I really didn't want to go there. And when you're tasting cocktails, it's not like wine. The spittoon thing doesn't work. I think you've got to sip it and drink it, and probably take a second through the. I usually take a drink through the drink with a straw. Went there. They had 40. Got there, so they've got 40 cocktails for you to try. I'm like, you're fucking kidding me. Anyway, 40 cocktails later, I'm not kidding. I've never been so impressed. 38 of them straight on the menu, and in the past that never happened. We'd often have cocktail
list.
Well, we're not going to obviously use all 40. We've just got. I think they thought we'd get 40. We might end up with 20 or 25. Yeah.
And of course, you can use them seasonally or whatever.
Exactly. And I just said 38 of them just go straight on the menu. I think 2 name changes that I suggested, one of which they thought, yeah, okay, one of which no. Just really left them to it, and I've not been so impressed. I've never been that impressed ever by a drink sort of presentation, competition, tasting, whatever. They absolutely fucking nailed it. And I just thought, the balance of the drinks, the style of the drinks, the glassware, the temperature, absolutely, the garnish, absolutely everything, without my input, which I used to probably 20% of a good drink in the past that came on the menu at one of our venues, I might have had some input into it like that. Didn't need to do anything to this. And I just thought that was a really good example of how far things have come and how good things can still be. And that's restored my faith, lost faith in cocktails and bars by just watching those two in action.
Well, that's interesting, because one of my last questions, by the way, it's 27 minutes past. What is the hardest of all stops? When you've got to be gone at 10:30? Or?
I think my flight is 1:40, so I've got an hour to get to Stansted. Probably need to be there for noon. So we could probably do 1:45.
Yeah, okay. We might not even need that long. I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I was going to say, we started the conversation by stating that 1997, the beginning of the cocktail revival in London.
Yeah.
So do you think that is still ongoing? Do you think cocktails are still evolving and improving and bar culture? Or do you think that it's become stagnant? or even gone backwards?
I think I think what's happened is, well, it's gone two ways, hasn't it? So what I was trying to do was democratize quality drinking, so bring really great drinks to the high street, and that doesn't exist now. You've got cocktails are everywhere now, but they're not particularly good. You've got a lot of creamy drinks and vanilla drinks, and they're not good drinks anymore. And then you've gone that other way, that sort of molecular mixology way. It's not molecular mixology, but it's like a bifurcation. Mm-hmm. We've gone mainstream and cheap, and we've gone kind of esoteric and underground, almost. Yeah. Up, low level. They're not big busy bars doing great drinks anymore. And there's a place for both. Hen parties and drinks geeks, which I include myself in that. But what I wanted to do was something more popular and enjoyable in the middle, and I think that's what London lacks at the moment. If I was to I get asked all the time for some good bar recommendations in London, and it's a short list. Mm-hmm. There's not many bars that I enjoy going to. What
are some bars you enjoy going to?
Well, I love Satan's Whiskers, but it's too small and it's a bit far away for me. I surprised myself recently by having an absolutely brilliant time and completely loving the Connaught bar, because I'm not a huge fan of hotel bars generally. And the reason for that is not because of who works there and what the drinks are like. It's because generally the crowd in a hotel bar is not, it's kind of like single older blokes desperate for, conversation or female attention. Often Americans, and the wrong kind of people. But I just had an absolutely magical time at the Connaught bar and was just so well looked after, and it just really changed my view of it.
They are quite good at that, aren't they?
Yeah, I really like. They were brilliant. They were absolutely fucking brilliant. I'm just thinking, this is weird. Like, so much about me or what I might want and when I might want it.
They've got a file on you.
They've got a file on me, and I've not been to the Connaught bar in 10 years. And I don't love some of the design of it and things like that, but being hyper picky. But I had a brilliant time there, and really grateful for them for that. And then I love bars like, do you know, like Below Stone Nest?
No.
It's kind of like a skanky student bar in Cambridge Circus below where Wings and things. I can't remember what the name of it is. It's just downstairs. I think it's something to do with Frank Boxer, who had the car park in Peckham.
Oh yeah,
Frank's in Peckham.
Yeah, I know the one you mean.
And they do like cheap cocktails that aren't particularly good, but they've got a brilliant music sound system in there, and they've got a really lovely crowd, and it's underground, and the vibe is just great. And I can get a Negroni if I want, as well as a slightly warm beer. The fridges don't work very well, so I like that place. I'm probably missing somewhere. I mean, I don't think I'm patient enough. My proper local is Teiran Elementary.
Oh yeah.
And I've had some really great drinks in there and some good times in there, but I've not been for ages. Not been since COVID. And Alex was great during COVID as well. He was one of the
they were pretty proactive, weren't they?
Yeah, no, and I've never sort of been in there. I mean, for starters, he owes me a drink for all the things I did in COVID, and I think I owe him thanks for the support he gave. But I mean, I enjoy going in bars like that, even though there seems to be, like, it requires an effort, it requires some planning, and it would be nice to be able to just wander into a bar like that, and the bartender says, "Hey, JD, how you doing? What can I get you?" And and just have an easy time of it. But I didn't make it easy to have a drink at Milk and Honey either, so I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, and I've stopped drinking spirits so much. I drink wine mostly now. I had a couple of whiskeys yesterday. I went to Lyle's for the last day.
Oh yeah,
which is my absolute favourite.
That was literally the last day, was it?
Yeah, last service. Yeah. So we were helping them polish off the last remnants of the back bar.
Nice. Yeah.
So that included.
I haven't been there in ages. Yeah. But it's sad to see it go.
Really sad. 11 years though. 11 years is a long time in
restaurant life. Yeah.
And even though it's the end of Lyle's, it's not the end of James Lowe's cooking, and I think he'll do something better wherever he goes next.
What are you most proud of?
I should say my children, but
let's keep it hospitality themed.
What am I most proud of? I think what am I most proud of? I think I don't really feel pride. I don't, and I mentioned my children. I never really felt pride around my children. I felt, you feel joy and comfort. a contentment if they're happy and they're, you know.
Maybe another way of putting it is, what do you think will be your sort of the biggest part of your legacy, if you like, so far?
I don't know. I think Dinerama is probably the best thing I did. Certainly the most successful. I think it all gets forgotten. I think what we do is not that significant. You know, I've not. It definitely changed. For a few years, it was quite pleasing to walk into any bar anywhere in the world and to see the influence of milk and honey and think, that's that light, that candle, that cocktail, the braces. I mean, that's Sasha, but, you know, I helped amplify his ethos, his existence, his, you know, approach. And that was quite pleasing. And I didn't walk in, and sometimes it was a complete rip-off. You know, and I remember somebody accusing me once of stealing Russell Norman's idea for a pressed tin ceiling, and I thought, well, hang on a minute, we did that first, and so I don't think what we do is significant.
I mean, look at the ceiling in here.
Oh, you've got it in here. Oh my God, well played. I noticed it. It's not as good when you paint it.
But I mean, as a third-party observer, for what it's worth, I would say that probably the biggest impact is the milk and honey.
Yeah.
In terms of how it affected bar culture for the next 10, 15 years that followed, both in standard of drinks, music, lighting, and the concept itself.
Yeah. No, massively influential. And I mean, and probably the most important thing I've done.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's next?
Just opened a restaurant with Stevie Parle, helping Stevie Parle open his restaurant. Spent last year helping Merlin open Ossip in Bruton, which is brilliant. And as another example of me walking into a restaurant, absolutely loving it, bumping into him at Glastonbury a few years later, finding out what he was up to, needed some help. So got involved there. He's now working with Johnny Smith and Daniel Willis from Luca, really good business partners to have for him. And I put the team together there, left them to it now. And then working with Stevie to get a restaurant and bar called Town open on Drury Lane. Opened a week ago, a week ago today. It's been a really good start. I think the best thing Stevie's done, he's a brilliant guy to work with, really calm, careful, ingredient first menu. He's passionate about his sourcing and all that, but not in a shouty way. It's just the way he's always done things. I love eating there. I'll love eating there more when we sort out the sound system. And Kevin and Dan have helped us with the drinks and come up with this great style of new drink called a Charger.
Okay.
So you've got to, if you go there, try a grapefruit Charger.
I'm going to go there. Sounds great.
Really nice.
Once you've sorted the music out.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Really nice. Give us a couple of weeks. Really nice, refreshing aperitif drink that I just think that's genius. Like you've just, for me anyway, you're probably going to tell me it exists somewhere else. But that's a brand new category of drink. I really love the name. It's called a Charger.
Yeah.
Because we've carbonated it. And there's a Silver Chargers, another one with rye whiskey. The grapefruit is with gin. And just really enjoyed working with talented, passionate people who are absolutely some of the best at what they do. And Kevin and Dan, Stevie and the team, a guy called Ollie we've got on as like an exec sort of consultant chef. Just brilliant. And a guy called Benoit as our GM, who was at Arlington, and he's come on and just completely thrown himself into it. And just watching these guys, who are obviously a lot younger than me, 20, 25 years younger, and just being absolutely passionate and professional and committed to creating an absolutely brilliant venue and guest experience. And that's why I'm in hospitality. I just love it.
Thanks so much, Jonathan Downey, everyone. That was great.
Cheers.